Hello and welcome to the Wise Wire. This morning I am joined with a great man, and honestly, just before we went live, we were just working out actually how long we've actually known each other. So yeah, that goes back a few years, and we didn't realise until we were in the studio. So as usual, the Wise Wire is not about me; it's about my guest. So Chris, introduce yourself because your career is incredible.
Wow, God, you've set me up there, Kirsty. I sometimes don't think it's exciting. I know my kids don't think it's been that exciting. Chris Jones. I've been. I have to be thankful because I've probably worked all my life. I don't think there's been any occasion where I haven't been working. But my background was very much IT and web development for a number of years. But for the last 13 years, I've worked for myself with a couple of companies that we started up. But my heart was always IT, and it sort of, I think I came at quite an interesting time because there was a transition between old, and people may not know this, but there was when before PCs, there was this old sort of terminal server scenario, and you had all this old ICL equipment, which was then taken over by PCs. PCs started to come in, switches, hubs, routers. These were all new things that were coming onto the market, and I was just at that time for selling that equipment. So really loved everything about the internet, what it was about, what it could deliver, and it was just an exciting time. And at that time, if you'd have said you'll be working for yourself in a number of years, I'd have probably said absolutely no way, because I loved what I did. I thought it'd probably last forever. But the technology changed. I think the last year of actually working was probably, weirdly, the lowest salary that I ever had. There were some great days in IT, and you'll probably remember as well, where it was easy to make a lot of money, a real lot of money, and it was new technology. And I use this phrase sparingly, but it was almost like the one-eyed man was king in the land of the blind, because if you knew a bit about technology, you could go into a business and say, look, this is going to change your business. This is going to, suddenly you've got PCs on everybody's desks. You've got 100 meg connections running to each desk. You can do things much faster, much quicker. You haven't got these massive ICL systems and IBM mainframes and all this sort of thing, tapes and floppy disks and all this sort of thing. And suddenly you went to this new networking scenario, and it's a really exciting time. So that was quite an exciting time for me, and very enjoyable. My last job that I worked at was with a web development company, and I always joke with my boss that I'd never worked for myself, and it was just out of the blue, really, that I just had this crazy idea about using Google Analytics. At the time, Google Analytics was fairly new, and I used it as a tool. I used to look at our website and go, okay, who's coming to the website? I don't want to be making 100 phone calls a day. Let me see who's coming to the website. Let me understand what they're showing interest in. And I would just phone people up. So if you came onto our website, or your company, I would know that there's probably interest in doing something web-wise, or doing a solution that you were looking at. And then I would just follow that up accordingly. And it just seemed to work very well. And it worked for a number of companies. So just had this idea to start this little company, little consultancy called Gloo. And it was really analyzing analytics, social media, to help small businesses find out who was coming to them, who would be possible targets for them to sell to. Maybe a couple of years in, and this was with an old partner, we looked at events, and we knew nothing about events. We had no experience, and the naivety at the time was we wanted to do the consultancy work in the week, and we wanted to do the events at the weekend. And we thought that would just work, perfectly. Little did we know, and sort of 13 years later, The consultancy has probably sort of gone to about 5% of what we do, and the events is about 95% of what we do. So yeah, the last few years have been just very interesting. Working for yourself is challenging, rewarding, every emotional you can think of, because it's events and it's event staff. There's always something that's going to throw you. It's a learning day every day, but I love what I do, and you know, touch wood, long may it last.
And I love the fact that you've just almost described my entire working life for the last 20 years in that synopsis there, because like you, I found myself in the IT industry, and that's what we were just talking about. You know, there I was working for D-Link, and I think you were at Allied Telesis at the time. And so we've got that. I also worked for Intel, and I taught people, and I love this. You know, I remember the days before a PCI MCIA slot, and I launched the Pentium 4 onto the market. I do a because it was the for mobile. And then, of course, we then went into the Centrino platform and all these wonderful things. But prior, well, actually, no, as I was doing that, I was also working in events.
Wow.
And then after my life I went into tech a bit more and really, really thrived in the tech industry. And then I found myself, like you, an accidental business owner. And I love I love it. And that imposter syndrome that you just talked about is really real. And people don't realize that we still have it. Even if you are thriving in business, that insecurity is still there.
Yeah, it's a massive thing. I don't know why we suffer it. But you know, even today, there'll be some days I'll just go, "What is going on?" You know, I'll hear somebody, and I think it's probably because it's a lack of understanding of maybe of certain situations. Because I'll hear people talking about something, and I'll just go, "I haven't got a clue what you're talking about." But I'm honest enough to say, "Listen, I don't know what you're talking about. I need to find out, or go away and find out, or whatever," because it's like there'll be a terminology that comes up and I'll think, I don't know what that means. Should I know what that means? You know, and the worry then sets in. And then 9 times out of 10, all it is some newfangled term that replaces something that you've known for a number of years anyway, and you've called it something else. But yeah, it's interesting. But as I say, every day's a learning day. So and I'm always keen to learn. It's not a case of, I hope one of my strengths is that over the years we've adapted and had to adapt, and not afraid to, you know, take on new challenges or learn new things or understand new things or new ways of working. Because one of my worries is, as you get older, and I sort of think, I don't want to be the old guy that still wants to use a quill and a bit of ink to write something. You know, it's you want to keep up with the times. You want to make sure you're up with things. And as long as I think I've still got that passion and desire to do that, I think I'll always be in business.
Oh, I love it. And actually, last week we were in Stratford, and we took our daughter into a museum, an old museum, and she actually picked up the quill and the ink and drew a beautiful picture. I gave it to my brother because it was his birthday. Beautiful picture out of ink, and it took forever to dry, but that's just given me a lovely image of that quill and ink. Because actually, you're right. The kids, my daughter had never seen a quill and ink, and she was absolutely fascinated by it. So something I want to talk about just quickly is the events industry that you're now in. You're really firmly with your feet planted, and how people don't see what you do. It just happens.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, we've got, as I say, we're a staff agency, so we supply staff for events in and around Oxfordshire, and one of our biggest challenges is that people don't know who we are. So, and I'm going to be very Oxford centric here, so apologies, but if you look at the Westgate, if you look at Sheldonian Theatre, if you look at Blenheim Palace, if you look at Stoner Park, if you look at oh God, I can't think of some of the places, any sort of university place, we have staff working there. Jack FM, for example, as well. if we have people working for these organizations, but you wouldn't know it's boys and girls, people that are working, because we're either in black or whites, or we're in branded uniforms for those organizations. And I've always just had it as a real challenge, and I've had sleepless nights about it and sort of wondered how we could affect that. But it really is just a case of keep doing good work, and where we can push the message in social media, which is such a strong thing to do now. But the early stages, it was interesting just knowing that we do something, and we've done some really interesting stuff over the years, but nobody would know it was us doing it. And I'll give you an example. Last year, Hillary Clinton came over for her graduation and a couple of other things, and we looked after her on a dinner one evening, and the next evening we looked after her at the Sheldonian for a graduation service. But nobody would ever associate those two things with us, because they were part of the university. But it was our guys stewarding, it was our guys at the dinner, sort of thing, etc., etc. But it's just fascinating, the stuff that we do. But again, and I sometimes I go to meetings and I say to people, "Oh, we've done this, this, and this," and I'm sure they look at me and go, "Nah, that hasn't happened." And we're like, "Yeah, we." And sometimes we're able to take pictures of stuff, other times we're not, and we just have to run with it. But the events industry is just such a great, diverse industry. So many different things. The thing that I love is that phone can ring, and you just don't know what it's going to be. It could be absolutely anything. It could be, the opening of a restaurant, to an orchestra playing at the Sheldonian Theatre, to a car show somewhere, to a promotion of a new shop, to running a bar somewhere. There's so many different things that it does, and that's one of the great loves and passions that I have, that we could be doing so many different things. And I think it's interesting for our staff as well, because it's not, I certainly wouldn't want to be coming to the same thing, doing the same thing every day. It's great that we've got a real range of different clients, and we're doing so many different things, day in, day out, sort of thing, really.
I loved my time. I really did. I used to run huge events at places like the NEC with teams of girls, and sometimes I'd have a team of 20, sometimes a team of 40, sometimes just a team of 2. And it was really good fun. And you had little slogans that you had to do. You had to stick within the brand guidelines. And the events industry actually underpins an awful lot of what I do with my clients today when I talk about branding, and I talk about being true to your brand voice. A lot of that I learned in the events industry, because it overarches everything, because you are a brand ambassador. You are representing a brand. And if you did it incorrectly, I can remember, this is the days where people used to smoke. So, you'd have to say to your staff, yes, you can smoke, but you've got to cover your branding. You've got to go round the corner. You've got to be as far away from the stand as humanly possible. People are not allowed to eat or drink in branding. So you'd have to put a coat on, and people don't realize that actually eating and drinking, you're just having your lunch break, not in branding, you're not. Yeah. And it was just, some of the times when you've got a team of that, you'd then get back to my hotel, and this makes people laugh. I was washing uniforms in the bath and laying it out, okay, because the uniform had to be clean the next day, especially if you were doing a drinks promotion and the fizzy drink had gone all over the uniform. So you'd be there washing it out. And I wasn't the only event manager doing it at the time, because I was on a skincare promotion, and the event manager at that point, I was the assistant, and we were scrubbing in the bar the uniforms, bringing them out in towels and hanging them up.
Good stuff.
So we're going to touch the big COVID-19. It must have hit you quite hard.
Yeah, painful, absolutely painful. You in business, you face challenges every day. There's always something that gets in your way. You're looking for that smooth growth, sort of up, and hopefully the upward curve year in, year out. But there's always sort of troughs and dips, etc. But COVID, the problem with COVID, it was just something that we didn't understand. We'd never heard it. We'd never understood what it's about. You know, a recession you knew about, and you knew what it involved, and you knew, you had to tighten belts, etc., etc. And there was a plan how you would get through it. But with COVID, I remember, obviously you couldn't come into the office. You were sort of at home for a while. And I remember being at home, watching the BBC News as everybody was, and you were literally watching every interview, every bit of thing to get a gleam, a bit of information. And I think the general bub was going to be, okay, couple of months, it'll be all over and we'll be back to work. So you were just waiting for that scenario. And I remember listening to, and it was a lady, I think she was a politician, and she said, and this was probably about 2 weeks in, and she said, oh, I hope you all realise this is going to be 9 months or more. And I just absolutely, and I'm unashamed to say it, I absolutely just broke down at that point.
Mm-hmm.
I just started to cry because I was thinking our businesses are all based on interaction, face-to-face interaction. So it was a moment of absolute devastation of, we've got 3 or 4 businesses that rely on interaction, people being together, events, etc., etc. And yeah, it was just a moment. And I went away, sort of gathered my thoughts, and we really had to think about what we were going to do. What, if it was 9 months, what was going to happen? And not only from a commercial perspective, but also from a retention of staff perspective as well, because we have anything from 100 to 150, 160 staff on at any one time doing bits and pieces. And suddenly, there was a week where we just had phone call after phone call, was just cancelling every event that we had planned. Because usually we have a forward plan 2-3 months or maybe 6 months, things, bigger events coming up in the summer or whatever, and everything just cancelled. So there was a moment where it was just, there's nothing happening. This lady's now saying this thing could last for at least 9 months. And we were thinking, this is the end. This is, the business is gonna finish. And I think one of the things that comes out of it, and I think it's where business people, and I suppose other people, I don't want to just say it's business people, but where I think you get strength from is you suddenly have to go, right, I'm either going to have to pivot or I'm going to have to do, or to ride this out, but make sure I'm ready to start again as soon as it's able. The pivot option for at that time was everybody was saying, look, we're going to go hybrid. And I sort of thought to myself, well, hybrid's great, but it doesn't help us because everybody being virtual, everybody doing Zooms, everybody doing what we're doing now, these streams, that's great. And we're still communicating, but it's not helping my business in the fact that I've got 150 people who still want to get out and work and do events. So we really had to think about, okay, we need to be ready. And one of the things, and I had a great conversation with one of my friends, a lady called Amy, and we just sort of talked to her, okay, what do we need to do? What do we need to be ready with for when events do come back? Because they will come back at some point. And what will we need to be prepared for? Because things like, social distancing and PPE masks and all these were all foreign things, and we didn't understand it. So we actually set up an events group, and we contacted venues, DMOs, event organizers, caterers, all sorts of people, and said, look, we want to have a unified voice for Oxford and Oxfordshire when we all come out of this thing. And we set up this group on LinkedIn, and weirdly, obviously it was online, But every week we just got together and go, right, what's the challenges? What's the latest instruction from the government? And it was such a good melting point of getting information and making sure that we were up to speed. We knew what was going to be happening. Right, okay, you can have 30 people outside. You can have this amount of people if it's going to be an outside function. You can do 6 people if it's indoor. All these things were changing on a regular basis. And so when it did get to a point of, you could actually start doing things again. And yeah, we still did some hybrid stuff. I mean, I think we actually did the first, excuse me, I think we actually did the first hybrid event down at the King's Centre in the country, where 6 of us got together. The guys from James Walton and his guys from that event company set up this streaming situation, and we did the first hybrid event in the UK, and it was just fantastic. We actually got into conference news. I think it was put into conference news, but we did get away from it, and we did get back to that. We could do something now. And I remember we did the Vice Chancellor's speech at the Sheldonian Theatre, and we'd done this thing for a number of years. And basically, you could almost get like 300, 400 professors who would be going into the Sheldonian to listen to the speech from the Vice Principal of what's going to happen for the next year. But this event was completely toned down. She was in an encapsulated plastic sort of booth. We had to make sure that all the professors were spaced out across the theatre. There was only probably about 150. But it got us back to events and what you can actually do. But obviously masks and, as I say, social distancing and all this sort of thing. But it was a challenge. It was a real interesting challenge. And, you hope we don't have to ever do anything like that again. But I think as business owners, you've always got to have a contingency plan. You've always got to, and it's not paranoia, but I think you've always got to think, what would happen tomorrow? What could happen tomorrow? What's happening? I get things like Barron's Daily as an email notification, and it's just telling me what's going on in sort of business and what the expectations are. Because it's, is the recession going to hit? Are we going to do, is something else coming down the pipeline? Do we need to look at new technology? Do we need to look at, this, I suppose, things like this sort of central bank digital system that's supposedly coming along? Do we need to understand that?
Mm-hmm.
Do we need to understand crypto? Do we need to understand all those sort of elements, blockchain and all those sort of things? What could be the impact? So I think you've always got to be asking yourself question, what next? But that I think that's probably been the most challenging time we've had as a business. And I think we did okay just getting through it. I mean, it was emotional, it was stressful. Not working for nearly 6-7 months is going to cause a strain for anybody. Luckily, we had a few pennies in the bank, and the rates rebate thing sort of helped to get us through. But challenging times.
And of course, that's when I met you.
Yes.
Met you again. So because I just launched the business, which I think was, and you reached out and you were doing Clubhouse at the time, and you invited me almost as the startup. And interesting enough, I was sitting on that call. My office at that point was slightly different setup, and I felt like a complete imposter. And I honestly, I was like, why am I on this call? And I came off, and I said to my husband, I've just been on a Clubhouse call, and he went, Clubhouse? Went, yeah, let's not, don't worry about that. But I was talking to people who are really big in Oxfordshire, and I was on the call, and he went, how do you feel? I went, like a fraud, but it was really good.
You were brilliant. No, you were brilliant. It was, but that's the thing. I think we all worry about things that probably aren't. There's nothing to worry about. I think we're using our insecurities to prevent us moving forward and prevent us doing what we do. It does. I don't think if your business day 1 or day 30, you can still not know everything. You can still got things to learn. as long as you're trying to give a good service or deliver a good product, that's all that matters. And if you're in business, I don't think, how you do it, why you do it, some of those things, I just think, don't worry about it. I say to sort of my youngsters, just do the best that you can. Don't worry about what other people are thinking. You're on your journey. Your journey is your journey. Nobody else can impact it. They might try and trip you up or whatever, but you're on your journey. Things will go well, things will go bad, but it's your journey. And people judging it is A, I think it's a waste of time, and B, it doesn't have any relevance. That's one thing I would say to a lot of youngsters about, don't worry, that old school. And I remember it, you'd be in the schoolyard and you'd do something wrong and people would take the mickey out of you and maybe call you a name, and you'd be paranoid about it for months, weeks, years, whatever, and it might have effect on you for ages. But the reality is, in the end, nobody really cares, and nobody would even bother and remember it in months to go or weeks later. But I think it sits in your head more than it actually needs to.
Really good advice. So I want to touch on who has inspired and supported you.
Wow, good question. Inspired. I listened to a talk by a very interesting guy. I don't even know. It's a guy called Stuart Miller, and he was one of the original founders of BuyBox. It's a business in. It's similar like to these Amazon boxes that they did a similar thing, but just under a different guise. And Stuart Miller was just one of the most engaging people I'd ever met. He came to do a talk at what was then the Clarendon Business Centre, and he was just talking about business in general. And I went along, didn't have any sort of preconceived ideas, but just wanted to listen to what he had to say. I always keen to sort of, as I say, learn and understand people. And he told this really great story about how his business was like a pirate ship, and he was a captain, and it was just, sailing around the world, just pillaging and going crazy and whatever. But the analogy was almost like, sometimes your business is sort of all here, there, and everywhere, but it's just a matter of trying to make it as smooth as possible. And I was so taken by this conversation, this speech that he did, that we had a conversation afterwards, and he mentored me on quite a few occasions and gave me some great bits of advice. And one of the bits of advice, and it's still apparent today, he said, I think we were talking about marketing, and he said, look, you have to think more about things. He said, if you had £1 million, you could spend £1 million really quickly on marketing and advertising, and you could do a television ad, you could do all these things, and you might not get the responses you want. But if you really have to think about it, if you only have £100 and you have to think about it and really think, how am I going to get the best out of this £100? Target audience, who are you going to appeal to? What's the message you're going to get out? And you have to really, really, really think, you'll get far more out of it. And I've used that up to this day. It's, we could spend a lot of money on a lot of things, but it's always been, right, how do I squeeze the most out of what we've got? And not just a case of, let's just spend money doing stuff. So Stuart was a massive influence and gave me some great advice. And there was another guy called Dave Beasley who ran Beeline Graphics and then went on to Oxford Office Equipment, who I've just known for years. And he's just one of the most resilient people you'll ever meet. He's old school salesman, just always looking for opportunity, always just always on every day. And that's something that, again, I've tried to take into things. And I think over the years you just try and take little pieces from different people and just go, what do you do well? Right, okay, we'll try and what do you do well? Again, you're still on your journey, but what can you take? What little bits of experience can you take from? There's a guy called Stuart Crook who's one of the partners at Wellers, and I just admire what he does and how he runs, helps run that business. And you sort of just go, right, I could take a bit of that and use that in our business, or I could take a little bit of this and use that. But excuse me. As I say, it's just a learning. It's a learning curve. I don't think, I will never be in a position where I say I know everything and that's it now. I'm gonna, I think everything's going to work perfectly, because I just know, being working for ourselves now for, I say 13 years, something will happen today, something will happen tomorrow, and it'll be something new completely that hasn't happened before. And it's like, right, how do we get out of this? How do we resolve this situation? So again, who could I phone? Who could I speak to? Who's going to be able to give me some bits of information? Who's going to be able to, and it's that old thing. And one thing that I always used to do, people used to think, I'm sure people used to think I'm an idiot, but I would be in a networking situation or a group or whatever, and somebody would say something, and I would just ask the question. I wasn't embarrassed to, I know some people go, oh, I'm not going to ask that question because I don't want to embarrass myself and I don't want to look silly in front of other people. But I would say, what is that? What does that mean? Because I'd want to know the answer, and I'd want to grow, and I'd want to understand. And I'm sure some people would go, oh, you probably should know that. And other people would go, God, thank goodness you asked that, because I wanted to know that and I didn't understand it either. Because I get people later on coming up to me and said, yeah, good thing you asked that, because I didn't have a clue either. But I just wasn't afraid of that. And even today, I'll still do the same thing. It could be awkward. It could be, embarrassing. It could be, something very basic. But I'll still ask the question, because I just want to learn. I want to understand. I want to improve my business. And so I'm not afraid to ask the question. So, yeah, I think those are the people generally that have inspired. But I'm inspired every day with people, just with their journeys. And the other thing I think is keen to remember is, you've got to remember everybody's on their own journey, but everybody's also is having problems as well. I think we assume everybody else is all right and it's only you having a problem that day. But the amount of people who've got, commercial issues, family issues, health issues, whatever, that they probably won't be telling you about, but they're just trying to go on with their normal working day, trying to deliver what they deliver. And you've got to, I think you've got to have empathy for them, and B, you've got to remember they might say something to you today, but it's a different answer tomorrow, because they'll be in a different mindset, or they'll be in a different headspace because of what they're going through. And, I think we touched on it just before we started. It's, with staff, I used to be very sort of, come on, we've got to do this, da, 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 da. But now it's like, okay, let's understand what, why did you want to turn up late today? Or why didn't you fancy working that shift? Or why did you make that phone call? And it's almost like, let's understand a bit more of the problem so we can help you get through it, rather than, just going, oh, you've let us down, and oh, you've let the client down, etc., etc. And I think that probably comes with age as well. But yeah, I think you just got to be open and learn every day. That's the key for me.
I think age it's wonderful. I'm going to put it out there. I love my age. I love your resilience, by the way, and I love the childish wonder that you have. And I think that's really, really, I found something that we both have. I ask the question as well because I want to know, and I'm obviously inspired by my daughter every single day. And if she doesn't know, she said, "Why is that?" So, hence the why. Why? To explain more. But I just love your resilience. So. Yeah, an age. Wow. I love the fact that I am my age, that I am of an age, that I am, menopausal. I am old, as I said the other day, an old crone. But the wisdom that gives me is incredible, because it does allow me to go, you know what? I'm not going to get stressed about that. Yeah, I am going to get stressed about that, but I'm not going to, I can choose, because the emotions are a little bit, I don't know, more in control. Or maybe that's definitely.
Definitely. And it's I think it brings a calmness as well. I now think my life is calmer because I don't want to get that stressed about things. No, there was an old adage of, we used to say it in the IT business when it was sales guys, it was like you didn't get a deal, and it was like, hold on a minute, I'm not saving lives here. We're just selling IT stuff. We're not, you know, if you're a doctor or a surgeon and you've got that person on the bed and you've got to operate, that's saving lives. That's stress. No, not selling a, you know, PC card or a 3-com hub or a HP switch or something. You know, it's like no, that isn't stressful at all. So, you know, with age, I think the calmness comes, which is brilliant as well.
So we've had Hayley join us, which is just beautiful. And she's, I love Hayley. She's just brilliant. She said she's really excited to hear all about you. So, and she's finally here for the full one, which is even better. And she said, asking my first scary ask was in the sales training session 20 years ago. The trainer said sales are cyclical. Now, good luck for that one because I'm dyslexic. And I didn't know that word, so asked. I definitely saw some relieved eyes around the table. That was the day I realized simple explanations have their place. And absolutely, and I love simplifying jargon. I really do. This is where the tables turn. You get to ask me a question that I've got no idea what it's going to be. So fire away. I kind of love this and also dread it.
Yeah, no. I was going to ask, what's been your happiest time in life?
That's a really good question. I'm going to say that it has been since I met Dennis. And yes, we have had our ups and we've had our downs. We've had some massive heartaches along the way. But Dennis is absolutely the moment that my life turned around, the moment that I found roots. It's the reason I rooted in Oxfordshire, because I was very transient before that. I didn't know how to build roots, and this man came along who was a lot younger than me. I hasten to add, he's 7.5 years younger, and I ran away and didn't want to go out with him because I was an old bag, and why would he want to be with me? And he chased, and he was there 6 weeks later, because I used to have a rule that said nobody's going to get under my skin. I was divorced at this point, so I was that kind of not bitter but very defensive divorcee, and somehow 14 maybe 15 years later, I look every single day and I have Dennis. And so the last 14 years have been absolutely the best, the happiest. I'm so grateful, and I'm going to continue to respect and love my husband and my daughter and my beautiful little life, because it really is what makes me happy.
The great thing about that, all the way through while you were talking, you were smiling.
Yeah.
You know, if everybody could be like that when they're doing something, you know, you speak to some people, it's like, well, yeah, but that answer you gave then, every moment you were smiling. So that was brilliant. Thank you. Excellent.
It's all right. He changed my life, and it really is that simple. He changed my life. I wouldn't be here doing this, loving every Friday morning, hearing about other people's stories, if it wasn't for him. I wouldn't actually have my beautiful, amazing camera that I use, because he bought it for me. And it's that support, that belief that he had when I was setting up, and I was like, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? I'm never going to succeed. I look now back and go, actually, I'm doing really well. But if he hadn't been the first person, he gave me the first $2,000, the seed money to set up. And he went, off you go and play. He gifted me the time to build the brand. And there's more than that. I can hear him in the hallway, because we've got a day off today. And it's just, he's brilliant. I've got to say thank you so much for joining me this morning. We've gone to 39 minutes, so I always try to wrap it up around the half an hour, but this has been an absolute blast. Thank you for your time.
No, thank you. Thank you for inviting. It's great to talk sometimes, just to talk about life. So, but thank you so much, and I'm sure we'll do other things. Hopefully, we both have, and the listeners as well. I hope we'll all have a great 2023.
We are going to have a great 2023.
Good stuff.